And we would love all of you to be on video, on mute throughout the session. Unless and until you want to share something, feel free to raise your hand and share. And we are gathering today here again to discuss competency 6 listens actively. After a gap, we discussed, I think, competency 5 several months ago, earlier, very early on in this year. And we were busy with so many other things, and we're jumping back into refreshing our competencies. I'm going to share my slide for a quick walkthrough on how these sessions came about, and we will continue from there. Can you all see my slide? Thank you. Yeah, so we did a survey in 22 to figure out what you all wanted to learn. And here is what the participants who participated in the survey then said. You wanted to learn about the coaching tools. You wanted topics on the competencies, setting up a coaching business, group and team coaching, self-awareness, and coaching methodologies. Today, I'm very, very happy to say that all of these have been touched or are going to be touched. A few examples, the coaching competencies, we've covered 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 we are doing today. As I mentioned earlier, competency 2, competency 1, the ethics one, we will do at the end after doing all the other competencies. Coaching tools, we've picked up a few more are lined up. As we go along, Lumina, MBTI, Strengths, and a few others are lined up in the upcoming months. For group and team coaching, we've set up a COP so that, that can be an extensive learning that we do in all forms and fashions. Methodologies is also picking up. You will see a session on Vedanta coming up later this month. There is one panel discussion planned on NLP and transactional analysis in the month of November, and a few other modalities coming up. So there is lots of action to look forward to, and I hope to see all of you there through the upcoming sessions. With that, we jump right into the session, and the competency is listens actively. So I'm going to test whether we are listening actively. I need a volunteer. Anyone who wants to put up their hands to volunteer for this. I can't see the participants. Okay, Neelkant, Shalil, sorry. Shalil put up his hand first. I'm going to take Shalil as the volunteer. Shalil, what I want you to do is to read the sentence, and I'll give you instructions, a little variation every time. The instruction for all the others, apart from Shalil, is to take a note of what is Shalil asking when he reads the question the way I ask him to do. Do we understand what needs to be done? He's going to be reading the same question again and again. You're going to just figure out what does Shalil mean in that, the way he's reading it. So Shalil, just read the sentence aloud so that everyone can hear the question for once.
Did you drive my red car? Sorry about that.
No worries at all. Yeah. So it's a 6 worded question. The question has 6 words. Shalil, if you can put emphasis on word 1 and read the question.
Did you drive my red car?
Yeah, that's the second version of the question. Shalil, you read it again with emphasis on just the second word.
Did you drive my red car?
I'm hoping you're all taking note of what does Shalil mean in that instance of the question. Shalil, again, same thing with emphasis on word 3.
Did you drive my red car?
Lovely. Same question, emphasis on word 4.
Did you drive my red car?
Thank you. 5th word.
Did you drive my red car?
I love the expressions. Thank you. Repeat the question with emphasis on the last word.
Did you drive my red car?
Thank you. I will stop sharing. And I hope all of you noticed the same 6 words being played over and over again. What did you observe? What all could have Shalil meant?
Salil meant 6 different things.
Hmm. And what were those 6 different things?
We'll take the first one, I guess. Did. Did you drive?
Hmm.
Did you actually drive? The did. It's on the action.
It was on the action. Okay.
The second one, for example, is you. So it's almost accusatory, like
Yeah.
you drive. You
Did
of all
anybody
people.
else catch a different meaning of did you drive my red car?
Or did somebody else drive the car? That
Possible.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Emphasis on the third word. Did you drive my red car?
Did you drive or did you travel?
Did you drive or did you click selfies in front of my car? Do nothing with it. It's
Yeah,
a
did
Or
you
did you, did you
push?
did-
Did you
or
push my
did you-
car?
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
or did you
do?
travel in the car? Someone else was driving, you were
Somebody
traveling.
else was driving. Exactly. Lovely. See, same word, emphasis, so many different meanings. Did you drive my red car? Emphasis on mine.
Very possessive. What is?
Yeah, so it might be very similar to the accusatory. Did you drive my red car? How dare you drive my red car? That
Yeah.
would have been a meaning. What else?
Or it could be also, there were many red
did you
cars.
drive somebody else's red car?
Somebody else's
Yeah.
red car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you drove some red car. Was it
Yeah.
mine or was it somebody else's?
Yeah.
Did you drive my red car? Then that's my favorite question.
Or
That
did you
means
drive my blue car?
Yeah,
I
see,
of all
I've
my
got a
cars.
blue, a silver, a
Of-
black, a
of-
grey.
Of
Which
all
one
my
do you
cars.
This is what Sachin Tendulkar will ask.
Yeah, lovely. And last one, did you drive my red car?
I have many red things like red motorcycle also and something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah,
Red chopper.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Maybe a red bus.
red bus. Yeah, who knows? So did you drive my red car or any other red vehicle I had? 6 words, emphasis on 6 different words, and so many possible meanings to the same sentence. What is it telling us?
It just tells that words don't carry the meaning. How you say them.
Yeah. Yeah, how you say them. Of course, there were no instructions to all of you to observe Shalil's body language, and he was also wasn't sure what is Shanti going to ask me to say and do. So yeah, how you say it, how you sit, what your expressions, so many other things get added on to the listening that we do. So we are getting back to our competency 6, which is listens actively. Anybody remembers the competency definition? And just show it to you. Focus on what the client is and is not saying to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client's system and to support client self-expression. We will look at some keywords in this definition before we dive into the sub-competencies of competency 6. So what the client is and is not saying. How would you listen to what the client is not saying?
Well, listening to the whole body and actively being present
Yeah.
to what is not being said, those silences, pauses,
Lovely.
eye contact, because that also has a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the tone as well.
Tone,
The
absolutely.
tone.
Absolutely.
And the speed at which it is told.
Absolutely. Tone, speed.
Pauses.
Tell me more about the process.
Not process, pause, I mentioned.
Pauses. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. You saying each word very thoughtfully, or is it coming out without much of a thought and processing internally? Lovely, lovely. So we are able to, we have a good sense of what the client is and is not saying. Next one, communicated in the context of the client system. What would that mean? Context of the client system.
the empathy part, understanding where the client is coming from.
And how would that help a coach?
So understanding the client's world and where is this concern, challenge, whatever the or barrier the client is facing.
Yeah. The last is to support the client's self-expression. We are listening as a coach to support the client's self-expression. What could that mean?
Not being judgmental and giving space to the client to speak.
Yeah, not being judgmental. Yeah, that itself offers lots of trust and safety so that the client can share more. And
promoting client to express.
Encouraging the client to express.
Encouraging the client, yeah. And when
Creating
you say
observing the authenticity and spontaneity of the client.
Once again, Johnny.
Observing the authenticity and spontaneity of the client.
Lovely. That actually heads into my next question. What does listening mean? And one variation of listening, Johnny just mentioned, observing. What else does listening mean?
It may include the verbal and non-verbal.
Yeah, observing both verbal and non-verbal communication. Yes. And
it means that you're saying that you value what the client is saying and you and you're interested in what the client is saying, sharing.
Yeah, you're curious, you're interested. That shows in the way you are present in the conversation. Yes. That is also listening. What else is listening?
Emotion behind what is shared.
The first few words are getting muffled. I'm not.
Emotion behind what is shared.
Observing the emotions, yeah. And what do we coaches do once we observe a change in energy or a shift in the coach's emotions?
We curious. We're just curious.
Curious.
We bring it to the attention of the coachee.
Yeah, you state your observation, what you're sensing, yeah, what you're observing, and then we see. So lovely. Now that we have a good understanding of listens actively, you're going to look at each of these sub-competencies. I'd request you to take a screenshot because I'm going to put you into 7 breakout rooms. Once you take a screenshot, I will tell you what you'll be doing in your breakout rooms. Yeah, there are about 5 or 6 people in each of the breakout rooms. If you're in breakout room 1, your focus is sub-competency 6.1. If you're in breakout room 2, your sub-competency focus is 6.2. What are you going to be doing in these rooms? You're first going to be listing the behaviors, attitudes, skills that the coach needs to demonstrate. What does the coach do or say, or how does the coach be in order to demonstrate that sub-competency? I also want you to think through what are the challenges a coach might face as they are demonstrating these sub-competencies, and come back with what is it that you have as a group arrived at, what can be done to overcome that challenge. So 3 asks. 1, what are the skills, behaviors, attitudes that the coach needs to demonstrate or adorn in order to demonstrate the competency? What challenges might coach face, and how can you as a group, what can you as a group recommend to overcome that particular challenge? If you want to take a screenshot of this too, you can. Do let me know if there are any questions before I open the breakout rooms. Yeah, so I'll put you in breakout rooms. I'll give you 10 minutes. At the end of 10 minutes, I'll ping and check, are you good? If you still need another 5 minutes, I should be okay. Come back with, knowing who is going to be representing your group and presenting back, so that we are not spending too much time on silence and waiting who is going to initiate the conversation. All the very best. See you in about 10-12 minutes. I'm opening the rooms now. Welcome back, Rani. Just waiting for others to come back. Five more seconds and they should all be here. The seconds right after a breakout is the best because I can see everyone's video. So thank you. I've clicked a couple of screenshots. I have my picture for today. Lovely. So we can get started with room number 1. What did you discuss?
Right. So I was describing things. So generally, we had looked at two broad buckets in terms of attitudes and skills, and then in terms of challenges. As far as the attitudes and skills, we looked in terms of being completely present, coming with authentic curiosity, having the necessary empathy, being a creator of space where it's easy for the client to be able to express, to make it, to allow the client to be able to express according to his or her own pace. And we came out with a little bit of a phrase ourselves in terms of letting things come as it is. So these are some skills and attitudes that we sort of enumerated. Yeah.
How will you demonstrate letting things come?
So one of the things that we actually talked about was in terms of be able to match the energy, or to be able to have the appropriate energy and approach to a client's energy or approach. So if the client is very energetic, if the client has a lot to say, is also speaking very fast, we need to be able to match that, maybe not to the speed that the client actually has, but to be able to sort of have that flexibility within ourselves to be able to take hold of all of that information that is coming, and to be able to note all that information and the energy with which it is being expressed. So that's, as far as challenges are concerned, something that we have always known about is our monkey minds that we walk around with, having assumptions about certain things. And because of these assumptions, we also tend to be judgmental. Another challenge that came up is we bring our own experience and context to the conversation, which could color the conversation. Impatience on the part of the coach, because sometimes you have clients who might share information very slowly at their own very slow, steady pace, and that might also lead to something. Even the very simple thing in terms of asking a question in terms of, so you've told me all of this, so you can ask, so what do you make out of this? Or you can actually ask, so what? It makes a big difference. So to be able to actually handle that. The other part of it is another challenge is in terms of the discomfort that we have with silence. And very closely connected to that is the bias towards action. These are some of the things that came up as far as skills, attitude, behavior, and challenges are concerned. We didn't really have much time to talk in terms of how to overcome this, but the general consensus is whatever is this as the challenges, be able to reverse that. But of course, yes, easier said than done. It's a little bit of work on that side.
Lovely.
Back to you, Shanti.
May I pose a challenge to room number 1 and see how you would want to respond? Yeah. Suppose I'm your coachee, you're coaching me, and you make an observation and you present it to me. Yeah, Shanti, the way you said it, it seemed there is something behind the way you're saying. You're making an observation, you're checking with me, and I'm in denial. No, no, there's no change, nothing. I'm good. How would you engage with that?
Since I've done a lot of the talking, I'd ask my roommates to actually roommates to actually respond. But I will also do that. I've done a lot of talking.
So if you're fine with it, what would you like us to talk about?
Interesting.
I mean, probably that's the point. I mean, sometimes the person is not ready to, come to that level. So fine, let's talk about what is alive in you, what is present in you right now, and what you want to talk about.
Lovely.
And let's again engage in let's.
Any other thoughts? Any other way anyone else would deal with this?
But I was just wondering, Shanti, if there is a intuition that there's something more, and you would like to touch upon it. Is it okay to make one more attempt very subtly, or something of the sort to allude to it?
Subtle attempt look like, Neeta?
I don't know.
So Shanti, I would just restate the facts again. So I heard you say this, and this. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Or you were trying to state, and then let it come. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, it's okay. It's not there. Yeah. So Geeta, that's the way I would handle it.
Yeah.
With permission of the group.
Sorry, sure. Arvind. What I want to say, sometimes insisting too much makes the client defensive. If you insist on your view. So to me, it's okay to if he or she is reluctant about that. It is just to note that reluctance. And we are no one to judge that we are only correct and we have noticed. So let the client have that space and decide what she wants. What you said earlier, Arvind, it's completely fine. We should accept that is part of our coaching, that we accept client wherever they are and however they want to express.
To build on what Pankaj is saying, maybe also just make a note of it and keep it with yourself as one of the observations which you may want to bring back if you see any other trends emerging which point towards that emotion or towards that energy drop. And you could always do that in maybe the session after that. And a lot of times the coaching, as what I understand, happens in between the sessions. So the client may just go back and say, yeah, maybe I did not respond to it, the way that I could have, and may come back in the next session with an observation.
So just to add to what Satyam, I mean, in case there are some data points and it's seeming like a pattern, then point out the 4 data points and say, okay, to me, it's appearing to be like a pattern. I mean, do you have anything to say?
Pattern, yeah.
Yeah. So,
I just have
but
one
that
more
for that
thing.
you require a lot of data to actually take out all the data and say, okay, it seems like there's something there.
I just add there, instead of a couple of points. One is waiting for the client to emerge into the space. When they see the space is safe and confidential, and they will come on their own. 2, even when we present the data, we don't have to add any adjectives to anything. What I observe is this.
Yep.
Is there anything that you can see for yourself from this?
Yep.
What are you learning about yourself from this observation?
Yep.
As much as an observation for them, I would also think, if the client is so resistant to share, have I created the space? Is there a learning for me here? Have I created the space for the client to emerge in their true self?
Lovely reflection, Michael.
Yeah.
I heard a question from somebody, but we couldn't hear the question out.
It wasn't me who raised the question, but can I take a moment here?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Neeta was talking about, and that intuition part. And I think it's a very valid point, because as coaches, we all know that the questions that emerge when we are actually coaching is coming from deep down within us, and that's really where it is, our past experience and our intuition. And I think if the coachee is in denial, I probably would say that, this is what you said, say all that she or he said, and say, when you were talking about this, I had a feeling, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I got a different feeling. And this is what came to me. Would you like to comment on that?
and leave it open for the coachee to comment. I mean, it's
Yes.
another
yes.
offer, whether they want to take it, leave it.
Yeah, and this is again, I'm just bringing up Neeta's point, because a time comes when, as a coach, I mean, at least I work a lot on my intuition as a coach, and I've heard Pankaj saying this, that he doesn't prepare questions because he gets the questions when he's listening to people or his coaches, and I think that's again coming from intuition.
Yeah,
it's all about when you are in the moment, you are in the presence. You get that question that needs to be asked. Thank you.
Lovely. Big round of applause for room number 1. We can move to room number 2.
I have a request.
Yeah.
Maybe speak about the marker before we start discussions on that, on what happened.
Sure, Neeta, good point. So my marker is, let me read it out. 6.2 is coach inquires about or explore the words the client uses. Okay, so in our group, we were Lolly and Shikha, and we also had Lakshmi, but he was driving, so he dropped out. And we had Ashwin also, but somehow we could not listen, hear him. Okay, so in terms of skills, behaviors, and attitude, the basic skill is curiosity about when you are inquiring about the words or anything. Is basic curiosity of the coach and having a judgment-free mind. So not adding our judgment and then asking about something, but really asking out of pure curiosity, and especially not adding judgment, because that might make, in one of the earlier conversations we're saying, may make the client defensive to explain something which he never meant, and it may go into some different direction. Then the other behavior is encouragement, and the other way to explore the words is encourage the coachee to explain the context. So don't assume anything on the context, but ask for the context. So further elaborate. So then, if any emphasis, if you notice in any words, share your observing and ask for that. Then being observant, so hear around the words and ask about, share your observance and ask about those. So those are some of the behaviors, and understanding the purpose, the meaning behind what we said, what he's not saying, or both understanding, both saying and not saying, and maybe sometimes clarifying. So those kind of behaviors, skills, and attitude we would like the coaches to have. And please feel free, Lolly and Shikha, if I missed something out. In terms of challenges, so one of the challenges which we face, in spite of having long experience in coaching, is still the self-talk, right? So we are in our self-talk when we are not fully listening, and then we are asking about what we are thinking rather than what he's saying. So self-talk could be a big challenge, or being fully present in the session. Or sometimes it is a fear to ask, and people talked of different kind of fear. One is fear of saying it's too obvious. What is there to ask, right? It's very clear, and sometimes that stops us to ask more about clarifying questions. The other fear could be fear of judgment. A fear of one is our own judgment, not fear, but our own judgment about what he's saying and adding that. And the other is fear of judgment by the coachee. Right? What he or she think if we ask this, and pressure to perform in a hurry to provide the solution rather than more. So providing the pressure to provide the solution and to perform, to add value to by providing solution. Okay, I think, and assumptions, right? Making assumptions is another challenge, which we would notice. And like the first group, we also didn't have much time to discuss about the challenge, but I see the solution is built into the challenges that we see. So the patience is, we have to develop patience. We have to be self-aware, develop self-awareness, develop patience, develop curiosity. Is more of a practice, and maybe having a mentor coach or a coach for ourselves to develop all these things which we talked about. Mindfulness could be another thing.
You
Taking the pause.
brought in your vulnerability, saying that, how much ever experience we have, there is a bit of this self-talk, this
Yes,
fear
there
of
is.
being judged, or am I judging my client? Am I doing things the right way? If I may ask a question to group 2, is the competency reads that you are curious and you inquire about the words that the client uses. How do you select which word to explore deeper on?
May I weigh in on that, please?
Yeah.
So there are lots of subjective terms that sometimes a client uses. And the client, let's also remember that the client sometimes comes inadvertently, subconsciously, bringing his or her own context. And in some cases or the other, she's so full of that. And that is also the assumption is the person who's also sitting in front of me probably understands that a little bit. When in fact, the opposite is quite true. Having said that, what should a coach do? The coach should be able to pick up on some of those subjective terms. And if I may use a very, very simple thing, I had a fabulous time, or I had a terrible time. For us to be able to pick up on those, to be able to recognize those words, and to be able to follow up on that. So when you said you had a terrible time, what does that mean? What exactly happened for you?
Yeah. And Rajesh in the text chat is saying when the client uses lots of words.
I think the correct word is when the client is using a lot of adjectives. That's what we need to explore. That what does he really mean by that adjective?
Adjectives, any I like the definition of subjective. So can the word have a different meaning?
Meaning, yeah.
And the coachee, then probably those are words to dig deeper into.
Yeah. And just to add, sometimes the coachee will use the words unconsciously repeatedly. So that is one of our catchy point, and some of the words with very emotion they will use.
Yeah.
Attached to emotion.
Without even realizing they're saying those words with so much of an emotion. Yeah. So using the same words to replay it back to them and share what you've observed can be very powerful for some sort of a self-realization, awareness to happen. Lovely.
And I would add that no, even though we say we are completely non-judgmental and not Adam, but we are a person, we are a human being, so we will have our own interpretation of the words, and it is all right. I mean, as a coach, I follow this as a coach. If some of the words have a potential for me to interpret in different ways, I would like to clarify them. And sometimes the different possible interpretation actually opens up the coach, because the coachee also starts seeing from different perspective what he himself said. So I usually don't stop myself if I see there are potential meeting from my side, if there are potential different possible meanings to the words.
Shanti, I just feel, the previous thing what was discussed, intuition.
Yeah.
I think that also applies, which words, you get a sense, there's a pattern or there's an emphasis, you just get that signal that, okay, let me ask, what does that mean? Just like Shaileel said, what does that mean to you? Right?
Yeah.
Because you used a word or, a phrase, and it might also come with some nonverbal, behaviors. Yeah. So that's again intuition. You pick it before the words come to your mouth. Yeah. Before the question comes to you.
Very interesting.
So I have a view about intuition, and sometimes that gives me a lot of pressure. because I need to have that intuition within me, and if I don't, then what will happen, right? So that pressure itself can sort of put you in a space where you're not able to access what you really feel or what you're really doing. And in that case, that awareness is so very important of yourself at that point.
Yeah. Just recognizing that, yeah, I have an opinion, I have a feeling, there is judgment in what I'm saying. Being aware helps you show up in a different way, keeping aside the judgment. And as Pankaj said, all of us are humans. Some sort of a judgment will happen. There are so many cultural, parental, economic, environmental messages that have been given to us that very hard to stay absolutely non-judgmental.
And being judgmental is our brain's protective mechanism. Yeah, so it is absolutely necessary for us to be judgmental, but knowing that and keeping that aside is where the talent, is. That's where we need to focus on.
Lovely. We move to room 3. Coach inquires about or explores the client's emotions.
I think we didn't end up assigning anyone, and Farah, who was facilitating, had to drop out. So we exchanged some messages, and I'll take a. Farah, are you back?
No, go ahead, Anuj. Go ahead, because I'm in between. Thanks so much.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and try to recap, and the rest of the group, I'll request you guys to please chime in. We have the sub-competency 6.3, which is coach inquires about or explores the client's emotions, and the behaviors that the coach should needs to demonstrate this competency. We discussed be emotionally curious. So notice the emotions, maybe ask questions that are connected with the emotions.
Back to on you, Anuj. What does noticing emotions mean?
Noticing emotions would mean that not just noticing the words and the thoughts, but let's say somebody's talking with deep pathos, or there is a sad feeling that you're noticing in the voice or the body language. You're noticing that maybe there is excitement in the voice. So these are words that are connecting with not a thought, but a feeling in the body. And therefore, the way the body expresses itself, what one is feeling, the inner body, that expression is the emotion, right? So any of such sense, something that the coach is able to sense, that's noticing in the emotion. And if one coach is able to notice that emotion, then they can ask about, not necessarily labeling the emotion, but you just simply ask, what are you feeling at this moment? What's coming up for you? Now, what's coming up for you is a little bit more open-ended, because you could even, a thought could be coming up for that person. But hopefully, you point the person to, okay, what's the sensation? Maybe a sensation. What's the feeling that's coming up for you? So that can possibly point towards the emotion. And if the person is connected with is conscious of their emotions, can articulate and verbalize. A lot of people can't. So it's not an easy space to deal with. But if we can help the coachee to notice what's going on, then it takes the conversation to a deeper level, rather than remaining at a thought and a surface level kind of a conversation. So that's one of the behaviors we were talking about.
Lovely. And the fact that you called out that it's not always easy for the coachee to call out, understand that they are experiencing an emotion. And this actually happened with me with the middle management client. And I said, so what are you feeling? He said, nothing. So, but I did see that, your voice became louder. No, those are all thoughts. Those are thoughts here, which are very clear and it's coming out. I'm not feeling anything. Yeah, so there was resistance enough to acknowledge that they're experiencing anger in that moment, but
so even if there is resistance and we notice that resistance, if we can help the client to notice that, then that's connecting with that emotion, helping the client to connect with their emotions. I think the language that Farah beautifully articulated was having that courage to help the client tap into the wisdom of their body, what the body is communicating. Right? Sometimes there may be fear that's underlying that, but you can't label it for them. But how do you help them to tap into what's happening? And she described this beautifully, saying, looking for the gold. You go in empty and you look for the gold, which is notice what's the client experiencing and what's coming through, what's coming across in the energy field. And listen with the whole self is something we said. So Johnny pointed out this, that we're just not listening for words, but listening with the eyes to even see maybe slight slouching or some sort of a movement. So the body language aspect of it. I think he spoke about that. Then moving forward to the second aspect, we talked about our values and beliefs could come in. That could be one of the challenge that coaches would face. And the risk of judgments coming in, listening for what I want to hear, and in a way stepping over the goal that's there. But, so that's something that can happen. And it's related to the earlier conversation about, the judgments can come in. So that is a bit of some amount of technology challenges we spoke about also, that in virtual conversations, sometimes noticing the emotions is a little difficult, especially if the client is not turning on their camera. So that's another bit of a challenge that can be there. And towards the solutions we talked about is this whole listening with whole self, courage to be empathetic, be fully present, and creating that open space so that the client can express themselves. So, I mean, these are words. Creating an open space is just words, but that itself is such a skill that all of us can continue to offer the gift of that open space for a very trusting conversation, or conversation in a very fertile ground of trust. To the team, Sudarshan, Johnny.
Yeah, I think at that time, Johnny had shared a technique which he uses called parking thoughts. Would you like to talk about that, Johnny? Very nicely described. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, Johnny, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sudarshan. I think what I realized in the conversation is that sometimes my sensing of the emotion has a lot to do with my own emotions. And therefore, to be able to get into that space with absolute curiosity, and I just developed a practice of having a parking lot before the coaching session. Because parking lot is not somewhere it's not a bin where you throw away trash, but it's a place where you keep your car safe so that when you finish the event, you come and take the car safely. So you're not dumping your thoughts, but you're leaving it safely so that it doesn't come in the way of me and the client. I think that's something which has helped me, because otherwise I have noticed that my thoughts and my emotions were the ones which were being interpreted as I'm noticing this. And then I realized that I'm noticing that as my own emotion.
Very interesting. Johnny, I'm guessing the parking lot might also come in handy in the conversation, wherein when the coachee says something and you are able to connect to the emotion that comes up, maybe you've experienced a similar incident or whatever it may be, and you're able to connect. It's important that you keep your emotion in the parking lot, stay present with the
absolutely.
client.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Basically, operating out of knowing can be a challenge there, and operating out of not knowing is a way. So it happened to me sometimes. situation of my life coming into that picture. And I immediately in that moment, I thought, okay, this is different. And immediately I shifted back to here. I would like to maybe take a few seconds when I was talking to one Ranji umpire. I asked him what is the hardest thing to do on cricket match as an umpire. Can anybody guess here what would be that? You can make a guess. The hardest moment for an umpire, cricket umpire.
To declare an out.
Yeah, I think what he said is, moment he makes a mistake, he gets to know in a split of a second he has done a mistake. And before next ball is bowled, he has to reset himself. Otherwise, he'll continue to make mistakes.
Very pertinent during World Cup season. Thanks for sharing that, Sudarshan.
Thank you.
Let's move to 6.4.
So Shanti, if you allow me to say, and I heard Anuj, many a times it's a challenge for the coach to really get into the emotional space that client is actually in. And neither is the client very clear about what exactly is the emotion he's going through.
Yeah.
So in such a case, the emotional wheel, if one puts the image of the emotional wheel before the client, and then checks out with the client as to where on the emotional wheel do you think you are. And because the emotional wheel is so finely segmented, the client is in a position to gain better understanding of what emotions she is going through.
Yeah. Very interesting. The challenge that comes to my head thinking about one of my clients, English is not his first language, not very fluent, and he used to move between Hindi and English, and I understand Hindi very well, so I was able to coach him. But I used to struggle with what is this emotion in Hindi? Is there a term for that emotion in that wheel in Hindi? And in a couple of sessions, we spent a lot of time Googling the meaning, and that actually brought down the essence of the session because we weren't able to communicate. And we said, okay, we will use the vocabulary that we have in Hindi, and we continued. So yeah, I resonate where it works brilliantly, but there are instances where that wheel might not work because it's got words that I don't know the Hindi for those words.
And I use a picture card, which has got different stages of how they arrive into the conversation. A lot of times when I see my client is coming in, and I use a picture card which is called a blob tree Pedro, and I ask them to look at that and tell me how they arrive in the conversation, where are they in the conversation, and where they want to be when they end of the conversation. And the first few minutes, I can share it on the WhatsApp later on. They immediately identify where they are, and the conversation is much more richer because there's nothing, it's numbers and somebody hanging from a tree, somebody helping somebody else, where they want to be. And I ask them, where do you want to end this conversation? Where you are now and where you want to be. And you can see a range of emotions. That's one point. The other point is I also noticed a very short stint of mine in coaching. Very difficult for a lot of clients to have a healthy relationship with their own bodily emotions and to articulate it. So inviting the client to create a healthy relationship with the self, a somatic experience that they can become aware of in the moment. Just talking about it outside the coaching conversation helps them to realize that.
Shanti, I have a point.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other bit is about the emotion is, so one is, of course, being aware of what's the nature of the emotion that they're experiencing, the feeling. What's the follow-up? One is the challenge to actually help them express what they're going through, but what therefore needs to happen next? What's the follow-up question? Is very often that also becomes an awkward thing because the client, on one hand, is the coach is not able to express it fully. Then you're saying, therefore, what do you want to do with it? You just can't leave it saying, okay, how are you feeling? I'm feeling this, but then what? So the question that follows next often, I feel, is another challenge.
Is as important as the emotion exploration. Yeah.
Right.
Totally. Yeah, we'll move a little bit faster. 6.4, room number 4.
Yeah. So I'm doing 6.4 on behalf of the team. So the behaviors, attitude, skills that we spoke about were pretty much in line with what's been discussed earlier. Being sensitive, being observant, having curiosity, and again, using intuition very often, letting intuition give you a sense of what's going through for the client, and also focusing on the unsaid, not just beyond the words, beyond the body language. What's the unsaid that the coach is sensing in the moment? So that was one of the things that we spoke about. There was an interesting point about what's the baseline. So while we're talking about a shift from where? And there was a fair amount of discussion in the group about, is it in the moment, in the session, or is it earlier? So Venkatesh had a good point saying that sometimes what he does is he senses the baseline even from the chemistry session. Yeah. So you're noticing the client's behavior pattern and energy from the moment you've started interacting with the client, and then when something happens in a session, you can immediately sort of calibrate that to say, hey, I think there's something very different from not just what happened. So there was another counterpoint to say, but there are ups and downs happening in the session itself. So where is really the baseline? As the moment you come into the session with, is that the baseline? Or the baseline is actually what the client is in the normal state, which is even from the chemistry discussion. So that was something that we spent, but we had to move on in the interest of time to the next question. But that was a fair amount of interesting discussion that happened. The other bit was about this whole thing today. There's a lot of stuff going on in neuroscience with mirroring happening. Another way to find out is, can the coach themselves feel what the client is going through? And then actually play it back to the client and invite, saying, look, I suddenly feel a certain heaviness in my chest, for example. Are you going through the same emotion yourself? So you are actually representing the mirroring that you are feeling, and saying that can you actually, or you think, is that something that you're going through, or is that I'm feeling, and are you going through that? So again, I think again there was a discussion about the counterpoint here, which was the challenge, that are we going in with our own, should we be detached? Yeah. And should there be a sense of detachment rather than representing our own emotions, our own energy shifts that we are feeling inside? But there was the whole thing about, in neuroscience, you're saying you're actually feeling what the client is going through. And I think somebody said that in the earlier session as well. But the fact is, yeah, can we actually keep ourselves aside? Can we park ourselves, like Johnny said, and go with a sense of detached attachment kind of thing? So that was something that was discussed. Another challenge that one could face is misreading the energy shifts and our own biases coming into play. Yeah. So what is to say that we are actually, maybe the client, like you said, I'm not feeling anything. So we are misreading the energy shift, because of our own biases. And one needs to be careful about that misreading. So again, present it as an invitation to the client to say, this is what I'm feeling. Is that right? Almost check with the client whether this interpretation is right. We didn't really get a chance to discuss the last bit about overcoming the challenges, but I suspect a lot of it was also avoiding anything that would take away the presence. Yeah. and being non-judgmental. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, additions?
Yeah, anyone from our group, if there's anything that I left out?
No, I think you summarized it pretty well, Rajesh. Thanks.
Thanks, Rajesh. I think you covered it very well.
Thank you.
How would you engage with the client who says they are not able to experience an emotion in their body? So they say, I don't feel that emotion.
I have a point on Rajesh's mirroring.
Yes, please.
Rajesh, if I can
Sure.
share a thought. So we had this discussion with my coach master who's in Delhi, in Singapore. He distinguished between empathy and empathetic resonance.
Okay.
And there he said that, don't get consumed by the empathy and get yourself into that feeling, but have the ability to see and sense that feeling. So he calls it empathetic resonance and not just empathy. And I'm just trying to see how that can be related to what you just said, because that's very powerful. Because if I'm feeling something in my chest, and that is entirely based on my somatic experience, and that I don't know if I can connect it with the client's soma.
Right.
So, therefore, our master said it's good to have empathy. At the same time, just observe the empathy, like you said, with a detachment, which means have the resonance of the empathy. Don't get into the trap of feeling, because when somebody is going through grief, for example, I can very easily get into my moments of grief when I lost my dear father. Okay, now, and that is actually bringing down my ability to be that mirror or a coach at that moment. So I'm just thinking aloud as I was listening to you, Rajesh.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you.
Empathetic resonance.
Yeah.
And even detached attachments.
I just have a point there, Johnny. You spoke about empathetic resonance, right? When you try and when you are empathetic, it's just about being non-judgmental and detached and just being empathetic. But if you look at resonance, then you're looking at the resonance is something that has to match with your energy or match whatever's happening with the client to your energy. And in that space, it might take you to something that you have experienced, like you said, right? So how does one then deal with that? Because if there has to be resonance, there has to be a similar sort of feeling, and sometimes as a coach, you may not even feel that the entire resonance. And that makes you then wonder if you're a whole person.
Thanks, Neeta. I think that's the question that we had a lot of discussion around that. So that's where I think he calls it empathy. So when I was coaching somebody during the COVID about having lost father, I was, for the 5-10 minutes, I was on the 23rd of August 2015, the last 15 minutes of my dad passing away. And I then quickly had to tell myself, this is not about me and my father. This is about this client and her father. So I had to just, so empathy is what I'm not saying which is the right definition. To be able to empathize and be an observer of that feeling is what he calls empathetic resonance. The other one, he calls it plain and simple vanilla empathy. Yeah, I think.
Can I weigh in here? Just a question. Is there a way for us to create a check dam for our transference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the definitions for empathy is usually people say putting yourselves in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
One of the simplest thing is to remove your shoes before you get into the other person's shoe. So that's the simplest way of explaining. Like if somebody is drowning in a whirlpool, if you also get into the whirlpool in the, with the intention of saving the person, you'll get sucked into the whirlpool. So you need to be safe on the banks of that whirlpool and then help the person. So that's a very important part of empathy.
Yeah.
So should we be, having empathy or compassion? Because when you say sympathy, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you. And if you say empathy, I hear you, and compassion, you say, I'm here for you, right? So it's a much more, it's
I
a
can
position
imagine
of
what you might have gone through.
Yeah. When you say compassion, you are in a position of strength where you're saying, no, I'm here for you to help you.
Yeah.
When you say sympathy, I can only see you, and I so see empathy. When I say empathy, I'm hearing you, right?
Yeah.
And there's a bit of transference there. You're also a little bit vulnerable there. But when you say in compassion, it's more about I'm here for you. So you're in a position of strength to help the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. Compassion is a better word. Yeah.
Loving all the deep exploration and reflection. All right, we move to 6.5. Coach inquires about or explores how the client currently perceives themselves or their world.
Yeah. So it's us, and so I'm going to speak, but then I request all my team members to please join in, all of them. So one of the important skills is, of course, curiosity, healthy curiosity, and asking exploratory questions about their own experience and how they perceive their own situation right now, their own currently where they are in their world, and how is it landing for them, how are they experiencing it. So getting curious about it. And then the listening skills are absolutely necessary for the energy shifts, the non-verbals, the tone of voice, the pauses, the silences, all those things. So those are the most, and presence, being there for and actively listening and encouraging the person. When you ask exploratory questions, you also need to encourage. And then paraphrasing if we have understood it right, because again, our judgment or our own experiences might come in the way. So paraphrasing and checking if what we have heard or understood is right. And yeah, so those were some of the things we thought about.
Yeah,
and
so what questions would you ask to figure out where or how the client currently perceives themselves or their environment? So any examples you discussed?
No, we didn't discuss any examples. Yeah.
Anyone from the group?
Yeah. Like, for instance, if the client has perceived a certain situation as very challenging, yeah, the current in their world, and saying that the world, like, for instance, if I take a very common, very cliched, this thing is about getting very stressed out because not being on time because of Bangalore traffic. That's a typical one. So trying to understand what about it. So what are some of the things that they can do, and how do they perceive, what is their daily, kind of routine is, and what are the options that they have, exploring options, exploring what else can be done, what are the different ways of handling the situation. So those kind of exploratory questions.
And how important is for them to deepen?
Yes.
So Shanti, like I said, I use this the card which I posted there to bring out how they currently perceive about themselves. It brings out a range of emotions and everything about themselves, how they are at the current state, what could be a future state. Yeah. And oftentimes you don't have to even ask a question, just one question, and then it's like you open the floodgates
of all the perceptions they have to now share.
Yeah. And I asked them, what is the closest thing that now you can identify yourself with? Yeah. And then they are very easy to get there. And I tell them, you don't have to have one state. You can be in multiple states. You could be in a state in your professional environment. You could be in a different state in your family environment. And you could be in a different state in a social environment. So be free, which also opens up them to know how to constrain themselves, to identify any particular vulnerability or anything like that. And then they will naturally speak about the one which is most closest to them. Others, they don't talk too much about.
Any other thoughts on this competency before we move to the next marker? All right, we move to 6.6. Coach allows the client to complete speaking without interrupting unless there is a stated coaching purpose to do so.
Yeah, this is Srini. I also invite my other roommates or teammates to pitch in. So one of the behaviors and attitudes for that, what we discussed and listed over there is the coach should give that space and allow the coach to talk and express freely. Okay. And we went on discussing how to operate from non-judgmental, view. And then living in the moment, be mindful of the conversation. And also as a coach, believe and acknowledge that the coach has a potential to resolve her or his issues. Then, yes, listening with all senses, both verbal, non-verbal. And then be very conscious to intervene or stop the coachee when he or she is talking or venting out, which is out of the stated objective.
So what you said is one of the reasons why the coach might intervene is when the conversation is headed in a different direction to what the initial goal stated was.
Absolutely. Then also listening from nothing. Again, without putting any filters to the coaches, in his or her mind. So these are the few objectives what we have listed, and getting into the challenges. While it's always good to say, easily non-judgmental, but at times it is tough to put into the practice. Okay, so for that, what we thought is there is nothing right or wrong. What coach is talking about is let her talk. Then controlling our own thoughts, just like that monkey story, which we know, how we can overcome that particular challenge. Get your mind space clearly before you start the conversation with the coachee. And not to share or impose your self experiences, what you had in the past in addressing similar issues. That very consciously a coach should avoid sharing for the personal experiences. And the last point what we discussed is not to pose leading questions. So there are the few things which we have jotted down, and I request my team to add if there is anything which I missed out or misinterpreted.
No, it's really spot on with all of what we talked about. What's fascinating in this particular sub-competency is this stated coaching purpose, right? Because yes, you listen without interrupting, and in one's own mind, as really put out all what we discussed, you don't even interrupt them in your mind, right? You listen. So that requires undivided attention. But there may be some instances when you may have to, there's a stated coaching purpose, right? And one was what, in case there's too much of, venting or too much of talking, and it's just a long monologue, and you're not really going to where the objective of the session was, then there is a certain way by which you can interrupt and then say that, probably something along the lines of, if you can just take a pause here because we've got lots to process. And then maybe, just say, how would you like to take the conversation, to meet that objective which you have, whatever it is.
You be
the other, yeah.
Coachee to the goal at this time, saying, how is this aligned to the goal? Or would you let them figure out what they want to do and probably continue sharing? I don't know.
How would you like, going forward, how would you like this, how would you like a conversation to go forward? Should help you. So if they want to use it just for venting, which is more in the nature of a, what I would call a counseling session. You're just getting things off your chest and you feel, yeah, I feel really good having talked to you. Okay, fine. Maybe that's what the client wanted. But and if it's
contracting, saying, so yeah, you want me to listen today. Yeah, I'm good with it. But yeah, we know what is it that we want to achieve by the end of today. Sure.
Yeah, they may have started out saying something else, but they just use the session for, saying things which they have not said before. Yeah. Saying the unsaid and all that. So there is, of course, therapeutic value to them. So that's one, if that's what they choose. But otherwise, it's reorienting them back, to what they started out or wanted, even broadly. The other, I'm just thinking, but that's always been a question. When should I interrupt, if at all, right? What's the stated coaching purpose? And one other could be, they say that, okay, 10 negative things and 1 positive. And it might be a kind of downward spiral saying that, this is terrible. I really, coming down hard on myself. I do this, I'm terrible in this and it's all my fault. And then say that also in somewhere between, at times, things actually, I get on top of things. So that's where you could say, interrupt and say that, okay, can you tell me more about, you mentioned that, there are times when, things are going well. So what happens then? What's really, working for you, and when does that happen? And so it's kind of directing them more towards a positive way of looking at it, right? So rather than it being a downward spiral, maybe you could temper it a little and then they can choose to move upwards, upward spiral. So, and apart from that, I just see I just thought I'd mention it. It is not something we discussed there, it's just a general point. There's a link between this and the other one, that other behaviors of the client, the non-verbal energy shifts. So it's linked to that. You see that, and then you say that, I'm noticing, you felt very excited talking about XYZ. Yeah. And, how much that relate. It's again really to get them back on. That's just something I was thinking, because is there more to, this stated coaching purpose? So this is something which I, invite everyone to reflect on, even if something comes up immediately now. But it's just something which has always fascinated me. What is the stated coaching purpose?
Thanks, Nikhil.
I had a question. This bit about, do we have time, or we're running out of time? So then in the interest of...
Are people okay staying back 5-10 minutes to cover the last competence, sub-competency too? Let's carry on. Let's see.
Yeah. So, and this is actually comes from personal experience. I had a client who would want to give an example for everything that he said. So it would be make a statement. For example, let me tell you, and the example would go on and on. Then the next point would come another example. And then it was the point about where do you gently interrupt, because it was one example after the other example after the other example. So, and it was very clear what the point he was made was very clear at the beginning. But I think his desire to amplify it and explain it through illustrations. And at some point at the end, after one session was over, I'd actually gently tell him that, look, I've noticed this, but I get what you're saying. So if so I think from the next session, it was all very clear. But there was a desire to always give example after example after example. And the question really is, how does one gently interrupt in such cases?
Repeating the way you just did, the observation that, there seems to be a temptation to exaggerate, over-exemplify a point that you're making. And how is it aiding our conversation, helping us? Happy.
We can also say that while we're here to listen to them all day, what will be the best use of my time with you?
Yeah.
Instead of coaching objective, because it happens a lot, because the coachee doesn't have somebody intently listening to them for an hour. So the agenda has to be set by the coachee and ask them, gently invite them to say, You can decide what is the best use of our time together as against the coach stated coaching objective, and also with the connection of long rambling statements, inviting to find a connection.
Yeah,
so
thanks.
it will evoke an awareness also. I'm straying
Or
off the path,
actually,
or probably there's a connection we can't see. Sometimes there are connections we can't see. Like it's like a tip of the iceberg, and then finally, the last minute it comes up with something.
So when
or
I
actually
when I go
explore it.
through this,
Sorry.
go ahead, Arvind.
Or actually explore it.
Yeah,
Explore
exactly.
this.
So when I go through something like this, I just use my curiosity to understand where is he coming from, and then invariably it's been a case of he is feeling very lonely. He doesn't have a space to. So it may be my interpretation that he's rambling, but that's he needs that space. And are we willing to give him that space? He may in the coaching objective, he may not be looking at, okay, this is my outcome and this is, he needs a space too. He doesn't have space at home. He doesn't have space at the office where he can openly speak. And he finds the space to be very therapeutic. I give him that space. Right. And what's the best use of our time together? Michael, I think if I may ask that question, I'm already coming with a prejudice that we are not using the time well. I'm not anybody to give that verdict to the client.
That's a nice point, Dhani.
No, we
Valid
can
point.
actually share. We can share our observation as it, what we find it landing on us with the client, saying that I hear you sharing a number of examples, and just would like to. I'm curious to understand where it's coming from. Even sharing one or two examples reinforce the point that you're making. But since I hear you talking and sharing a number of them, would you like to come up with where it's all coming from?
So I have two things. It happened with me, and I felt that from we had contracted for 8 sessions, and from session 2, it was just moving like nobody's business, and we moved very fast, and there was so much trust, and the movement was there. So that was one point. And second, I use such a behavior with the feedback that I get from the stakeholders. In case there's something in the stakeholder which points to such a behavior, then we are curious as to, so how does this impact your conversation with others, as it is mentioned in feedback ABC and so forth. So I if it's alive in the client, there's no point pushing another agenda. Whatever is alive, I would recommend, I would go with it.
In the interest of time, can we do 8.7? Yeah.
Yeah.
Number
So while I'm sharing the views of the group, I would request other group members to also chip in whenever they feel like. So our competency that we explored was 6.7, which said coach succinctly reflects or summarizes what the client communicated to ensure the client's clarity and understanding. This was the competency that we discussed around, and we came up with the behaviors, attitudes, and skills that need this competency to come through is by exhibiting a deep interest and connection with the client. And obviously these are words, but this is how the whole conversation should come through with this kind of
connection, this kind of, relating to the client, that should come through. Exuding the warmth and partnership. That sense of partnership must be palpable in the conversation, so that the client has got more space to explore and feels very, very, confident going forward in the conversation, moving forward and expressing fully. The challenges that come in this kind of an approach would be to, of course, a lot of other participants here have spoken about suspending our own judgmental self. So we have our mental patterns, right, which is part of our conditioning. So we have, whenever we see a kind of a challenge or a problem, we have the triggers from our mental patterns suggesting that this could be the likely reasons, and therefore our questions get constructed around those patterns. So how can we sort of tone down our biases and things like that, and allow ourselves to sort of learn from this conversation, or to explore further and stay curious during the conversation. To overcome is to sort of keep our judgmental self low, and also to learn from our various conversations that there are several viewpoints, and many of these viewpoints, and this is what comes from reflection from various conversations, is that several viewpoints or several approaches that come through from different people are far better, or they actually explore a different domain altogether than what we felt was the appropriate domain to walk into. So this, in a nutshell, is what captures the behaviors, the challenge, and the manner in which we could have we can overcome these.
Lovely, lovely.
Any other team members?
I remember when my mentor had rejected my recording because I used the terms lovely and absolutely unconsciously so many times. The intent was not to say what the coach is saying is absolutely right or something. The intent was just an acknowledgement, but on the transcript, or when he heard the audio, it didn't sound like it. It sounded like, there is, I am judging. Yeah, absolutely what you're saying is right. It wasn't that intent. So it still is an effort for me. I think those words are so inbuilt that without consciousness it comes out, but yeah, how it gets transferred. Any other thoughts, additions?
Yeah, Shamik?
I think you've covered it all.
Thank you.
Thank you, people. With that, we do end. It was a lovely discussion. Thanks for all the sharing, bringing in your vulnerability, and creating this safe space for all of us to explore Competency 6. I've pasted the links to the upcoming 2 sessions, October 30th and November 9th. Please do register. You will receive the save the dates and the ongoing posters coming in shortly. See you all in about a fortnight.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Shanti. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Good
everyone.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.